Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? One of the things that's happened to me every once in a while making videos is that one of my viewers, one of my friends, will anticipate one of my video topics before I actually make it. And so this happened just the other day. I had some video topics on deck. I've had some experiences. I've been thinking about some things, and I just, it was on my list of things to talk about. And same old G actually made a comment to my video that the recap I just did on All for One, our last session. With the black powder stains, and it was really funny because it anticipated this video I was planning to make today or tomorrow, so I decided I'd make it today. So I had this brief discussion with him on Messenger and kind of laughed a little bit. So here's the background of what's been going on. He kind of said that the character Philippe that I have is a lot like the character Tess I've created for this game of The Veil that we're going to be playing. And I've mentioned The Veil a few times. I made some videos about belief-based games, or my initial impressions, to them, or about them. And of course, going to play these games. I want to play the games, then make some videos and see what they're really like and everything. But it's kind of funny because as we talked a little bit, it kind of illustrated the difference between our approach to character creation. I'm not saying one way is better or one way is bad. However, in a belief-based game like The Veil, there is certainly a prescribed way to create a character, which is a little bit of an antithesis to the way I normally create characters. I don't always create the same type of character, but quite frequently I follow a bit of a pattern. And one of the things that G mentioned, which is probably the central part of this, is the fact that a lot of times I bring characters to the table that are not quite finished. They don't come in with incredibly strong motivations. I've talked about this a lot on my channel, but generally I come in with an idea of what the character is like, an idea of what their personality is like. I've had fun playing games, like All for One, where you write down something. You have some kind of motivation already you've kind of committed to. But even so, that doesn't give you the total motivation of what somebody like Philippe Moreau in All for One, everything he wants. He comes in and he wants fame. He's a youngest of several brothers, right? So he has a bit of a motivation, but he doesn't have this, point by point thing he wants to do, motivations or drives or directions in life. So I want to make this video just talking a little bit about the difference, like an approach for like something like what I'll call, for lack of a better word, like the directionless character that finds their direction by interacting with the game world. And that's my preferred method, is to have a character that has a personality, has motivations, but then there's a dynamic game world, and I find out in this game world what I'm actually interested in, and then my character starts to pursue that. Versus something like where the character begins with a direction already, which is something that we're going to have to do in this belief-based game. Versus this other style, which is the directionless character, and this is a very classic, old-school style, that finds their direction by what the game master tells them to do, which is not something I like to do. That's certainly a style of play that I grew up with. It's still a style of play that I encounter every once in a while today. Sometimes, you play a one-shot or whatever, and that's kind of what's going to happen, is that there's something prepared already. So, as I was talking and thinking about this topic, talking to same old G, I started to think of it more as like kind of a supporting character, and sometimes that's the role that I gravitate towards occasionally. I mentioned that in that All for One game that we've been playing in, we had two very focused characters in terms of Martin and Jean-Marie, who both had really strong and clear motivations. Jean-Marie wanted to kill the werewolf that killed his son. Martin, on the other hand, wanted revenge and to regain his headship, or to gain headship of the Martel family. Briscourt and Philippe, on the other hand, were sort of directionless characters. They had motivations, but they didn't have a specific thing they wanted to accomplish in the game. And over time, as the sessions have gone on, we become more and more interested in various things. Certainly that's happened with Martin as well. Jean-Marie has kind of completed his arc, and has left the game. So we're left with these three characters now, and it's really becoming kind of interesting. I quipped in that last video I made about that all of a sudden it really seems to be about this kind of this Martel family, and the more things we're finding out, the more it's kind of pointing to and lining up with what Martin's motivation would be. And at this point, Philippe is becoming sort of a supporting character. It doesn't mean he's a lesser character, but he's a person that's kind of bringing his actions, or what he's becoming interested in line sort of with Martin's motivation. This wasn't like orchestrated or planned, but this has seemed to kind of organically happen over time. I really like a situation like that. And it reminds me of a thing that I think GBJ brought up one time. One of these, he said tongue-in-cheek, kind of these scenarios that never work. And one is called Hero and Company. And this is something that, as I look at my bookcase, as I think about movies I've watched, stories I've read, etc., that's a very common theme. There is probably a focal character, and there's a company of people around them, associates. And who has the real strong motivation or really strong drive, or the goal? It's probably one character, but everybody else around them is in a supporting role. That doesn't necessarily mean they're lesser. Sometimes you can have a hero and company type scenario based on relative ability. There's somebody that's clearly the hero, and everybody else is not quite as powerful. They're less capable associates. But a lot of times, a scenario like that can arise, where it's based on status, the noble and his associates, which is a little bit like what's happening with Martin, but not really, because we didn't come into the game as his lackeys, so to speak, or probably more appropriate with a person with a strong direction or motivation and their associates, and that's probably what's really happening in the All for One game at this point. We're all hanging out, we're all friends. Martin has the strongest motivation out of all of us, and we're also bumping up against this same family. And so over time, our motivations, our drives, what we become interested in has lined up a lot more with that. And so these are kind of like the friends and associates of a driven character that gets swept up or swept up by or otherwise latch on to their friends' motivations. And to me, that's a very comfortable, very natural thing to have happen in a game. So it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes as a group you have no real direction or motivation, and then you find it via interacting with the game world, which is, I'm okay with that as well. But it can be really kind of compelling to have one character that has that real strong motivation, and the other people, over time start to sync up with it. I don't believe that's something you need to orchestrate. It's certainly happened here very organically in our All for One game, and that's been very satisfying. To me, what I've seen happen, and what you want to avoid, and I'm going to use a derogatory term here, and I don't mean it to be derogatory. You want to avoid the war of the snowflakes, where everybody has this special drive or this motivation, a really strong motivation or drive, and what happens sometimes, I've seen this happen, is sometimes they don't line up, or otherwise they conflict. And nothing's worse, in my experience, that a group that's being pulled in several directions with equal forces. Every character has this really strong motivation or idea of what they want to do, and as a whole, the group lacks direction. As the Pointed Man said in Nilsson's, a point in every direction is the same as no point at all. So to me, that's just as directionless as a group of characters that are just milling about, wondering, in the tavern, wondering, well, what do we do now? So, to me, playing the supporting character can happen in a few different ways. It could be simply you're in line with that other character. You're following the leader, so to speak. Or the group's motivations. However, a lot of times, I enjoy playing, and I've seen this happen. This kind of like, I guess I keep saying organic, but this tends to happen, and it's one of my favorite play styles. Is where these supporting characters also pursue their own motivations, but like on a more subtle or background level. And the perfect example of this would be somebody like Philippe. He's still pursuing fame. He's still pursuing his rank in the Renoir Academy, fame in general. But he's, that's a little more subtle. That's kind of like a side tangent to what appears to be the group's motivation and Martin's motivation as well, where we're coming face to face over and over again with this very large group of people that represent the Martel family and their associates, their cohorts, and we're trying to figure out how does this all work? How do all these pieces of this puzzle, how do they really interconnect or not? Sometimes, on the other hand, you can be following the general motivation of the group, but you're associated with that group as a matter of convenience. And, I was thinking about that, and probably a perfect example of that was this character, Duras the Wizard, I played years ago in the original Lamentations of the Flame Princess game I was a player in, where we were simply allies of convenience. We had, as a group, we started to develop this strong motivation through interaction with this dynamic world. We followed up on something that we thought was interesting in the world, rather than being, the game master didn't say you must go this way. There were several options. We over time decided that's what we find the most interesting. However, at the very same time, Duras was, had very clear motivations for accumulating power for himself. But these were things that I did on a tangential side level, as opposed to yanking the whole group in this direction. No, we're going to follow my motivation here at this point. It was something I did along the way because it was convenient for him. So, to me, that's kind of the general way I like to play characters. Sometimes I come in with a stronger motivation off right off the rip. This game, the Veil we're going to play in right now, I have to make sure that my character has very strong motivations, from the get-go, and Tess is somebody that, is a character that's, she's artificial. And she thinks she might have been created to serve humanity, but she's not quite sure. Not help, but serve. But she's trying to figure out what she is, who she is, all that sort of thing. Where she came from. In the Lamentations in Prussia game, it's been interesting to follow these characters that, Jürgen came in with this incredibly strong motivation, and over time that has changed. Heinrich really had no motivation whatsoever, and the good doctor was kind of drifting, and over time these guys have sort of developed a cohesive group motivation. And it's been interesting to see, how the dynamic between these characters has changed. I already kind of mentioned the All for One game, which is really great, and how things went in the Lamentations game I played years ago. In the Hollow-Earth, I played 2 Hollow-Earth one-shots. One ran by Anthony, where we played Chuck and Halsey. I played Spencer Holiday, and it was a one-shot. There was just a situation that happened where we both came with fairly strong character motivations. I think especially my character. He wanted to be rich. He was greedy. So within the context of the Hollow-Earth, as we were exposed to that, Chuck's, Halsey rather, still acted in a very greedy fashion. So I was able to follow my character's motivation as short as that session was. And so that was a better example. It would have been interesting to see what that would have been like as a campaign. But that was something that kind of came in already with a very strong bent. When I played Mulligan, Bruce Mulligan in the Hollow-Earth game ran by Jason, Bruce had a much more, his motivation was just more survival, and that was a little bit more of a situation where we got kind of plunked into a situation. And so, while I played my character's personality, Bruce wasn't in charge of the group. He wasn't, he was simply a guy that said, okay, this sounds like a good idea because you're going to pay me, and it's better than hanging around here in Cairo. So 2 very different, both characters had fleshed out personalities in my head. One had a much stronger motivation once he was dropped into a situation, and Bruce was somebody that was more of a supporting character. In the Pathfinder game I played in years ago, there was no motivation. It was simply, the game master said, here's what you're going to be doing, and our group, did these things because that's what we were supposed to do. And so the characters had some personalities, but it was flat and lifeless to me. So it was interesting talking to Same Old G. As we come in general, I think, with some different approaches to creating a character, where G likes to have a character that's a little bit more baked and comes in with a little bit stronger motivation at the start, and somebody like me that likes to have a personality but likes to develop, have the character develop over time. So anyhow, that was just some thoughts about that. I chuckled when I looked at what I'd said about Philippe and how Philippe was somewhat directional, was latching onto something, and I think that's an awful lot like my initial character creation with the Veil, where I had to kind of revamp it because G was like, "No, that's just too vague. You've really got to, the way this game is built, you've got to have stronger motivations." It was really funny to see him make a comment on my video that says, "Hey man, you're making the character the same way. It's kind of a theme with you," and I suppose it is. But perhaps I'm somebody that likes to play a supporting character. I'm not sure. Not all the time, because other times I played characters that were steamrollers, and everybody else was kind of running to catch up with me. So just a kind of an interesting look at how to play characters, how to approach getting a motivation, how to approach interacting with the world. It's not as cut and dry as it seems, and being a supporting character ain't all that bad. It can be very rich. So just some thoughts about all that.